I work downtown, 2 blocks.
All right, good morning all, and welcome to our session this morning on end-of-life decisions. We're going to talk about what you want and how do you get it. I'm Joan Harrold. I'm the medical director for Lifesong Hospice and Palliative Care. Some of you may know Lifesong through Mike Leader here. We are affiliated with Country Meadows, and very happy to be so. I have been a full-time hospice medical director for the majority of my career, and left for a little bit to do some medical policy work, and then came back and was recruited to Lifesong, and I'm very happy to be there. And at the end of this, if anybody would like to know why I'm so happy to be there, I'm more than happy to tell you. But mainly today we're going to focus on medical decision making, something that I have helped people with for a number of years, and how it sort of wraps into end-of-life care we'll talk about at the end of our conversation together. So we're going to talk about 3 main things. We're going to talk about creating plans, completing documents, which is not the same thing, and then making some decisions, both in general for healthcare, but also, as I said, we'll talk a little bit about hospice at the end. So let's start with a premise. Hope is good. Hope is not a plan. Okay? People will say, well, I hope to have a good death. I hope to die at home. I hope not to be in the hospital, hooked up to machines. Hope is not a plan. It's a good place to start, but let's just keep in mind that that's why we're going to talk about creating plans, completing documents, and making decisions. So the first thing I want you to think about is the fact that we're not talking about just one thing. There are lots of things that can happen to us as we have more medical issues, as there are things that happen as we age, as there are different diagnoses that come up. So it could encompass any number of these things. We could be talking about end-stage medical conditions, which I want you to know that in Pennsylvania state law actually has a definition of an advanced, irreversible, incurable condition. The assumption is that it's progressive and leads to end of life, because otherwise we could be talking about advanced, irreversible, incurable arthritis, right? So we're really talking about significant medical conditions. But we can also be talking about creating plans and completing documents for being permanently unconscious, losing advanced mental capability, having some permanent but not total confusion, being frail, ill, chronically uncomfortable, or injured with serious brain damage. It's not one thing. So that's why when we're talking about creating plans, completing documents, we need to think more broadly about the fact that different things could happen unless you already are at end of life, and we'll talk about that too. So in healthcare, in medicine, when I teach, we do case-based teaching. So let's talk about a case. Let's talk about a person. Let's talk about Mr. R. Mr. R lives with his daughter and his son-in-law. He's 87 years of age. He's a widower. And he has increasing debility with multiple medical conditions. Pretty common, actually. Very common medical conditions. He's got a little diabetes, he's got some heart disease, some lung disease, and unfortunately he also has some dementia. And he goes to the emergency department because he's restless and he's agitated, he's got a fever, he's got a congested cough, and he's diagnosed with pneumonia for the 3rd time in the last 4 months. Happens a lot. Happens a lot this way. So every time he's had pneumonia before, he's lost some ground. He loses some weight. He doesn't function as well. He can't take care of himself the way he used to. He's less and less interactive with the family. And he got out of the hospital 6 weeks ago. Remember, this is the 3rd time he's done this. And he's been in bed. He can't get out of bed by himself now. He eats, but not very much. He sleeps about 18 hours a day because he's in bed all the time. He doesn't say a lot when he is awake. He's not terribly interested in what's going on. I will tell you that this is based on a real person, and when his grandson comes home from school, he does perk up a little bit, but otherwise he's really not participating. But he seems comfortable. He doesn't seem to hurt. He seems okay. But he's now in the emergency department because he's got pneumonia again. And he's getting worse. He got antibiotics, and he got some IVs, and he got some oxygen, and he's not doing well. And his breathing parameters suggest that if this continues, then he would be a candidate for a breathing machine, a ventilator. He was on a ventilator the last time. He got out of the hospital. And his doctor said, you know, we had a hard time getting him off this machine. we're not sure we're going to be able to get him off the machine next time. It was touch and go. Now, some of you may have been involved in circumstances like these, in making decisions or knowing about people who've had these things happen, and this happens a lot. This happens a lot. So, what kinds of plans would it be nice to know if he had? Well, I put some of these up there earlier, which apply to him. Does he have an end-stage medical condition? The answer is yes. He has end-stage dementia, by definition. He's bedbound. He's not really talking. He's got recurrent pneumonia. He's not really involved in things. Doesn't seem to know what's going on. Is dementia an end-stage condition, what we used to call a terminal illness? Absolutely. Absolutely. So he does have an end-stage condition. He also has advanced loss of mental capability, and he's frail and chronically ill. So, what do we do? Well, I said he lives with his daughter. She's actually the younger daughter. She's there, and she says, Dad would not want to die on machines. Because remember, they said he may not get off if we put him on a ventilator again. Call the sister in Virginia. I made it not California. I'll tell you in these examples, it's always the other coast, but it doesn't have to be. We called the daughter in Virginia who says, I want everything done and I'm going to be there tomorrow. So what do we do? What would Mr. R have us do if he, 10 years before, 5 years before, could have told us exactly what to do in this circumstance? Well, the likelihood that any person knows exactly how it's going to go is probably close to zero for most of us. So what documents would help us? What decisions would be useful at this point? So what we're talking about is advanced directives. Advanced just meaning before it happens, sometime later, I'm giving you direction about what I might want or what's important to me or what kind of care would be helpful. And the two that we mostly think about are living wills and durable healthcare power of attorney. I'm going to give you a little bit on each of these from a medical standpoint. I will not pretend to be an attorney. I don't even play one on TV, okay? So, advanced directives. Let's talk about them sort of in general. There are lots of forms out there. The state has a form. It's in the law. You can use that one. There are other forms that comply with state law. You can use them. There's one that we're going to send some samples of later. I don't know, Mike, if we can give them to you or somebody else, but we'll send them in for the class if you'd like, called 5 Wishes. Many of the attorneys have forms. UPMC has forms on the web, which are actually pretty good. Doesn't matter what form you use. What matters is using the form to answer the question, what's important to you? Okay? So, let's talk about the living will specifically. Living will is really about end-of-life care. It is something that is activated when your physician has it. You can't just go to someone and say, well, they have a living will and this is what it says. I need to see it. If you're telling me that somebody has a document in which they have put information about their health care when they are at end of life, you need to produce that document. It's not that I don't believe you, it's that if I'm going to follow the directions that you say are there, I need to see it according to state law. So you need to produce it. And either the person doesn't have the capacity to make medical decisions and they've got that end-stage medical condition, or they've been diagnosed as permanently unconscious. And there are different levels of that. That's a medical issue. We're not going to go into all of that. Okay? The other one that I mentioned is called a durable power of attorney for healthcare. This is when you name someone to be your decision maker, and we usually call that person an HPOA, their healthcare power of attorney. So if you are in a hospital setting and you are the decision maker, and there is a document that names you as the decision maker, sometimes you're the decision maker and there's no document, we're going to come to that. Somebody might refer to you as the HPOA, you're the healthcare power of attorney. And the person doesn't have to be in stage, they don't have to be permanently unconscious. They have said that you may make medical decisions for them, or you may have said that this other person can make medical decisions for you. And there's a wide variety of things you can do with that. You can say, they can make decisions as soon as I've signed this. Or you can say, they can only make decisions if I lack the ability to do so for myself. And one of the documents that I saw online had these two choices, exactly as I wrote them here. They can make decisions for me as soon as I sign the form, or they can only make decisions if I cannot make my own. Why? Sometimes people choose not to make decisions. I've had lots of folks who I think could make a decision, look at me and say, talk to my daughter, whatever she wants me to do, I'll do. Talk to my son, whatever he thinks is best is what we're going to do. Are you allowed to do that? Are you allowed to be a person who can make your own decisions and you choose not to? Sure. People do it all the time. But it's nice if you have a document that you give someone that leeway if that's what you intend to do. So this is why I'm telling you, these forms are out there. They allow you to do different things, but I want you to think about what it is you're trying to do, because signing the form is really not all there is. It's thinking about what you're trying to communicate. What is it you want people to know why you're filling out the form to start with? So, what does an HPOA do? You can see I'm a big fan of the HPOA model. They get all the information that you would get if you were able to, or if you choose, if you would choose to, and they make informed decisions. They're supposed to consider any instructions that you have left, and if you haven't given them any instructions, and that's a choice, that's okay, then they should make decisions that they believe you would make for yourself. What they're not supposed to do, so think about this when you're choosing somebody, is say, well, I know mom would want this, but I don't agree with that, so I'm going to tell you to do this other thing. And if you have named that person your healthcare power of attorney, and I, as the physician, am going to say, talk to me more about what you mean mom would want me to do this thing. That mom would make this other choice. Talk to me about that. What I'm not going to do is say, you're not making the choice your mother would make, and therefore, no. But it would be helpful if I can say to them, you know what? Mom picked you to make the decisions that she would make. Talk to me about the decisions your mom would make and why she would do that. Let's talk about that. Because they're not supposed to make decisions against what they know you would decide. Okay? So, keep in mind with all of this, you can change or overrule or countermand is the legal term, decisions that your decision maker makes if you're able to do so. Just because you've signed on the dotted line doesn't mean that you now don't get to make your own decisions. And I bring that up because I've had people say to me, oh, well, they've got a healthcare power of attorney. Go ask the daughter. Go ask the son. Go ask the spouse. Like, hold it. Can they make their own decisions? Do they want to make their own decisions? You don't give that up because you signed the form. I've also had people say, well, I'm going to put it in the safe deposit box until it's time for someone to use it so that no one will override my decisions. You know what the hardest thing to do is? Get something out of a safe deposit box. So please don't put it in the safe deposit box. Please make sure that you take your healthcare power of attorney, first of all, and tell the person you picked them, and we'll come to who you pick in a second. But know that just because you pick someone to make decisions on your behalf when you can't do that for yourself, or if you choose not to do that for yourself, you still get to step in and say, oh, hold it, I'm still here, and I actually want to do something different. That's okay. You're not giving it up. You're making it possible for someone else to help you when you can't do it for yourself anymore, which is an important distinction. So, let's talk about choosing your healthcare power of attorney. Who should make decisions for you if you're too sick to make them for yourself? Whether you're not unable or whether you want to say, just ask my daughter, just ask my son, just ask my spouse. This is not a popularity contest. This is not which of my children do I love the most. This is who knows what's really important to you and who's good at making decisions when it's tough. Because most of the time, we're not talking about making decisions when it's easy. We're talking about who would speak for you if choices have to be made. My husband and I have 3 adult children. I have one who doesn't like to even choose between chocolate and vanilla. And you have to think about who would be good at this. Not just who's here or who's nicest to me or whatever. So again, this is not a popularity contest. Now, some people will say, I want all my children to feel loved equally, so all 7 of them are my healthcare powers of attorney. Oh boy. You can do that. That means we're going to take a vote on the really hard decisions. And that may not be what inspires love and peace and harmony in your family. So think about that. What I helped a family friend do way back, he said, well, I want my daughter, he had 1 child, I want my daughter to make these decisions. But I want her to talk to you, and at the time, my dad, about what the decisions are and what the choices are. I said, okay, we can do that. It's your document. You get to put things in your document from a medical standpoint. So say, I choose her as my healthcare power of attorney, and I would like her to talk to these 2 people about healthcare decisions before she makes them. You can do that. And he did. And he took it to an attorney later when he was updating his documents, and the attorney was also somebody I'd known since I was little, and he called me. Now understand, I grew up in Virginia. Much of my accent is gone, unless I'm actually down there. His, however, was quite prominent, and I got a phone call one day. Joan, I'm looking at this document for George. I believe you have introduced some ambiguity into the document. So, well, yes, I have. It's his document. Well, I'm not sure about the ambiguity. I said, well, here's the thing. Legal documents are great, and they are perfectly aligned with what happens. But for most of us, we end up with medically messy. Mr. R has an end-stage condition and some dementia, and he's frail, and most documents don't say, if I have diabetes and heart disease and dementia and I'm on my 3rd course of pneumonia, they're just not that specific. So the ambiguity that my family friend attorney was so concerned about already exists in the world, in how the decisions usually have to come about. What we did is we made it so his document reflected what he really wanted, which was for his daughter to talk to me as a medical person and to be supported by my dad in whatever decisions needed to be made. So the ambiguity wasn't in the document. The ambiguity was in he had no idea what was going to happen to him at end of life. And what happened to him is not something that we usually put in documents. So it's okay. The more important thing is picking someone who can make the decisions and reflect what's important to you. And if you want one of 7 children to encourage peace and harmony after you're gone, then you can say, I want this person to be my healthcare decision maker, and I want this person to consult with the other with their brothers and sisters before they make a decision. That still leaves me as a physician knowing who gets to make the decision, but it puts it in the context of how you would hope the decision would get made. And that's okay. That's okay. All right. I mentioned a minute ago, what if you don't have a document? What if you haven't picked your person, your HPOA, your healthcare power of attorney? Well, be it good, bad, or indifferent, the state has an answer for you. The Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has a law that actually sets out not who your healthcare power of attorney can be, because only you can do that, but who your healthcare representative will be. And there's a list. These are the people that in the absence of a document, in the absence of the person that you said would be your decision maker, and we can't find them. They're off in Borneo somewhere and they're unreachable for the next 3 weeks. Well, guess what? We got to make a decision, and you didn't pick a second person to be the backup. So either there's no document or the person you picked is not available. Then the state says, well, there's a list. And to be on the list, your person has to be 18 years of age or an emancipated minor. Again, that gets into legal stuff, but there are legal definitions for that. And they cannot do everything that your HPOA, that your healthcare power of attorney can do. And in fact, they can only say no to certain, what we call life-sustaining interventions, if you have an end-stage medical condition or are permanently unconscious. So there are some restrictions here. It's not an automatic substitution. It's not like you can have chocolate or vanilla. But the state does have a list. So let's talk about the list. Here's the list. First and foremost, your spouse, unless there's a divorce pending, and adult children from a previous marriage. And they're in an equal level. So if you're married to your second or later spouse, but you were married 50 years ago and had 4 children, your current spouse and those 4 children are equals in decision making if you have no document. Why? I can tell you exactly why. Because there were some high-profile cases where somebody had been married for a long time, they had adult children, their spouse died, they remarried, they'd been married to the second person a couple years, and their adult children, who were in their 40s and 50s, were suddenly cut out of decision-making, and they had a spouse that they'd been married to for 2 years who suddenly had all the power. And people said, wait a minute, is that right? You don't want those kids having any say at all? Is that the way this works? Well, guess what? In the law, they fixed that. But it also means that if you were married 60 years ago and had 2 children and got divorced 55 years ago and got married again, and you've been married for 40 years and you've got 4 more children, the children of your current marriage are on the lower tier, which is why a document would be really helpful. Okay, so this is the state list. So spouse, unless there's a divorce pending, and children from a previous relationship, adult children of your current marriage, followed by parents, followed by adult brothers or sisters, followed by adult grandchildren, and then if you got nothing, if you have someone who knows your preferences and values. I'm going to suggest it's just easier to fill out a document. Pick your person, pick a backup to your person, and then we don't usually have to deal with the list. So yes, I'm a big fan of picking your person, so we don't do this. The other thing you should know, if we have to go to the state-approved list, is that majority rules when there are multiple people in a group. That's a really tough time to be calling for a vote. Okay, so there are 4 of you. Who thinks mom should be on a ventilator? Who thinks mom should not be on a ventilator? And it's split 2-2. What's going to happen? Mom's going on a ventilator. By law, if we do not have a clear decision, then we are required to prolong life with whatever means are necessary unless it's clearly contraindicated. Now, what really happens is we probably are gonna end up looking at a possible ventilator and then continuing to support everybody as to why we think it's a bad idea. And let's talk. Because you know what? This sounds good. It looks good. But when it comes right down to it, and I've got 4 people in the hospital trying to make decisions for somebody they care about, we really are working towards consensus. We really are working towards, let's have some agreement about what's best here. But it takes work when people are starting from different places. And you have to decide if that's really what you intend or not. If you have decision-making capacity, by the way, you can change this list. I'm gonna go back for a second. You can say, I don't want so-and-so to be making decisions for me. So you can exclude people from the list. Don't do it vindictively. If you're gonna exclude somebody from the list, just make your own healthcare power of attorney with your person, your backup, and maybe another backup after that. And I'm saying this as a kindness. When you actually put something in a document that says, I don't want so-and-so doing something for me, how does that leave relationships after you're gone? It could be a little harsh. It could be a little harsh. It could breed some discontent, some disharmony. So I recommend instead of, I don't want someone, have a more comprehensive list of how, the order that you would pick people to make decisions for you. Okay. My mom, for example, has a healthcare power of attorney with 3 layers. I'm number 1. My husband's number 2. One of my adult children is number 3. And that's good. That's good. I like the 3 layers. I encouraged her to do that. She could have kept going if she wanted to, but I think we're good. So, now, I did not mention this one yet. When I talked about advanced directives, I talked about living will and a healthcare power of attorney. Some of you may have seen this document. This is called a POST. In other states that don't start with P, Pennsylvania, it's called a physician's orders for life-sustaining treatment. In Pennsylvania, it's called Pennsylvania Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. You know, we took advantage of the alphabet, what can I say? This is different from an advanced directive, and I'm going to explain why in a second. But I want you to notice a couple things that we're going to come back to. First of all, there are multiple boxes. And secondly, it says orders. When we think of medical orders, we are usually thinking of something that is now. We write orders for certain medications in the hospital. We write orders for certain treatments. It's not in advance. So a living will and a healthcare power of attorney are considered advanced directives because you would likely need them later, at a future time. You're writing them in advance. The POST, Pennsylvania Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, are current orders. They are medical orders signed by a physician or a nurse practitioner or a physician's assistant who knows you or your loved one, if we're talking about somebody else. They are frequently provided either by physicians or in facilities. Hospitals can have them. We have a lot of them at Country Meadows facilities. Other communities will have them. And if you recall, it's bright pink. It's actually called Pulsar pink. That's the color of the paper. And it was picked that way so it would be hard to miss in a sheaf of papers. It's brilliant. It's like Pepto-Bismol pink. Okay? It's hard to miss in a sheaf of papers. And the idea is that it can go with you. So if you have a loved one who has a POST and they live in a community, if they do need to go to the hospital for something, that POST is supposed to go with them. It's a traveling document. And it complements advanced directives, but it's current orders. Okay? I bring this up because it's for a specific group of people, and this is why it's current. These are people who are already seriously ill. So you might think of somebody who's been very sick in the hospital and maybe goes to skilled care in a nursing home and maybe they try a little rehab, maybe they're too sick even for that, but they're in poor condition, okay? With a chronic progressive disease, it could be dementia, it could be heart disease, it could be cancer, it could be all kinds of things. But it's usually considered end stage. It could also be for people with advanced frailty. Now, that's not a real good medical definition. There is a medical definition for geriatric frailty, but maybe somebody doesn't have that one big diagnosis, but they are, as one of my attendings in residency used to say, dwindling. Mr. R was dwindling before he got his most recent pneumonia. There's no code in the hospital literature for the dwindles, but we all have seen people who just are dwindling, okay? Advanced frailty. It's not usually for somebody who has maybe multiple medical conditions, but they're stable, they expect to have, years to live. That's not when we see a pulse. So it doesn't really fit into the realm of advanced directives, it's current directives. However, there's something very important about it. Where my arrow is here is pointing to what I call the all-important empty box. I love the rest of the post. It walks you through what kind of medical things you want. It's a very useful document for having a conversation about what's important to people. But don't forget about the all-important empty box. Because the all-important empty box says patient goals, which goes back to the kinds of things we also put in living wills and healthcare power of attorneys about what's important to you. What kind of care do you want? What matters to you? How should decisions be made? What should people be thinking about for you? Okay? Even the post allows you to personalize your form so that people know what best to do for you. I had a patient many years ago when I worked in a nursing home that had skilled care, had assisted living, and we had a hospice. This was in Washington, D.C. And I was sitting down trying to talk to a resident. She lived there all the time on the skilled unit. She was custodial care. And I said, well, you haven't picked anyone to make decisions for you. Let's talk about that. And we did that. And I said, well, what should they know? What should guide their decision making? And she said something that does not exist on any form in this fashion. And that's why I remember it. She said, if I don't know my children when they come into the room, I'm done. If I don't recognize my children, stop everything, including my insulin. That does not exist as a checkbox on a form. But that was the guiding North Star for how I was supposed to support her daughter in making decisions for her. I had another patient. I said, who should make decisions for you? She didn't pick anybody on the list. My grandson's ex-wife. Okay, how do we get there? Her children were somewhat estranged from her, but her grandson was really very close with her. Her grandson and his ex-wife had a very good relationship. They had divorced, but they were still friends. He traveled a lot overseas. The granddaughter, or the ex-granddaughter-in-law, was actually pretty local, still tight with her former husband, still visited my patient regularly. And she said, it's going to be too hard to find my grandson, and my children are kind of out of the picture. So yeah, my grandson's ex-wife. Okay, she gets to do that. But I certainly wouldn't get there on the state-approved list, would I? Maybe at the very bottom of someone who knows your preferences, but it would not occur to me to call the grandson's ex-wife if she had not have told me that. So it's important that you personalize your forms and you tell people what it is you're trying to accomplish. That can start by talking with your physician, your nurse practitioner, your PA, about, given where I am right now, what am I looking forward to as best as we can, look into the crystal ball. That can change. Crystal balls are pretty cloudy much of the time for us. But I have these diagnoses. What should I make sure I put in my advance directive? That is a very legitimate question to ask. What are some of the unexpected things that can happen? Should I be putting anything about that in my advance directive? What's the core principle or core principles for you in how decisions should be made? Have you talked to your family about those? Now, I would say, I guess I was 30 and pregnant for the first time, and I said to my husband, and we were not in Pennsylvania, by the way, I'll come back to that in a second. State law in Pennsylvania matters to this, but I was pregnant. I said, you know what, if I'm in a terrible accident and it looks like that I'm pretty close to having this baby, and he or she, because we didn't want to know, by the way, can survive, it's okay to keep me on machines for a while and let's see what happens. It's okay. Now, in Pennsylvania, state law would require that. But I lived in a state at the time that did not require that. That's not something I would be worried about today. So our circumstances change. So this is not a once and done, by the way. This is a big diagnosis. Maybe it's time to sort of talk to your healthcare decision maker about, this is what I'm thinking, this is what's important to me. And then when you can, put what's important to you in your documents. Does that introduce ambiguity into the document, as my attorney friend said? Yes. Why? Because life is full of ambiguities, and medicine is messy. And it's more important that we know how you want us to make decisions sometimes than for you to try to imagine every possible decision that could need to be made. So, here's some examples that I pulled from some healthcare power of attorney forms that are out there. Okay? Here's what it says. If I am so sick that I might die soon. Now, you can fill this out 20 years before you die. This is, if I get that sick, what do I want? And they put it in plain language, and it's a checkoff box, actually, on this particular document. Try everything and keep me on the machines, I don't care. What that means. That's what some people want. It's good to know that. It does not mean that medically inappropriate things will be done, but it does give me a different direction from, I don't want life support, I want to focus on being comfortable and allow a natural death. Do you hear the difference in philosophy there? I don't have to know the exact medical circumstance. I need to know how you want your decision maker to make decisions. And a question like this gives me that kind of information. And there are people who would pick everything on here. I mean, not one person would pick everything. I should say that a little more grammatically correctly. There are people out there, many of whom would pick, there would be somebody for every box here. I've taken care of all of them, including the I don't know what I want. Okay, that's okay. You are not required to know exactly what you would want in circumstances that right now you may not be able to imagine. That's why it's even more important that you pick a person who can make decisions for you if you cannot make them for yourself. Here's another one. This is like my lady who said, if I don't recognize my children when they come to visit me, I'm done. What makes your life worth living? What are the important things for you? I will tell you that I had a colleague whose dad was quite fragile. He was in skilled care, he was in a nursing home. And she was talking to him about, Dad, what's really important to you? How should I make decisions for you? And one of the things he said about being frail was, well, if I can be here and watch football and eat chocolate ice cream, it's not a bad day. It's okay. Now, does that mean every day he's going to watch football and eat ice cream? No. But what he was saying was something that actually studies have told us through the years, which is this. It is hard when you are healthier, to imagine your quality of life when you are less healthy. So when we talk to people in their 20s and 30s about their advanced directives, and believe me, I've tried this with at least one of my children, they accept very little disability as being a good quality of life. They just can't imagine it. Oh no, I wouldn't want to live like that. Well, what happens to most of us? We don't go from perfectly healthy one day to quite fragile the next. It can happen, but not commonly. We ease into it. We kind of age into it, right? Well, what we think as being a life worth living may change from what we might have thought in our 20s but didn't have to live with any of yet. So, talking to family and friends. Okay. Taking care of myself. Is independence important? It might be. How about a little dependence? This is a Sunday school, so I get to say this. Is it okay that we depend on each other? Is it okay that we help take care of each other? Is it okay that we take care of people physically who need help? If it is okay for us to take care of people physically, it's a very short step to it's okay for us to be the people who sometimes need help and sometimes need some care. Sometimes we give to others by receiving. And you've got to figure out where your faith journey is in demonstrating to people how to be a good receiver, not just a good giver. And I don't pretend to make that distinction for you or decision for you, but I'm going to ask you to think about it and where it fits into your faith and philosophy. I had a lovely, lovely gentleman in hospice. I understood he had a lot of pain, and I went to go see him, and actually his pain was pretty well managed with the changes that we had made in his medication. And I said to him, after I introduced myself, I said, how can I help you right now? Your pain seems to be good. How can I help you right now? His answer was this: help me teach my children how to die well. I need to be an example. I still get shivers when I relate that story. And that's exactly what he said to me. How do I put that in here? I talked to him and I figured out what was important to him. It wasn't in advance anymore. It was real. It was now. So we're not talking about trying to figure out the words for 20 years from now. But I'm asking you to think about some of these things that aren't going to be on your legal documents as a checkoff box, but are so critical to who you are as a person and in relationship with other people. So, you know what? I'm going to go back just for a second. We've got time. One of the things that I will tell you that is in one of my documents is it's okay if I need to have life support for a short period of time because my children want to come. But if it's longer than X period of time, then we need to stop. And they need to know they are loved. And that's okay. Why? Because at least 2 of my adult children are frequently not around for work. They are out there, away. Do I want a document that says never do X if they just need 24 hours to come? No. I'll give them that if it's important to them. put it in for yourself. All right. I'll leave you to think about that heavy thing, and I'm going to switch just for a minute to hospice. Because one of the things I was asked to come talk to you about is decision-making in hospice as well. So let's talk about this for the last couple minutes. People sometimes say, and we've talked about end-stage medical condition, that clearly you have an end-stage medical condition if you are thinking about hospice, because we equate hospice with end-of-life care, right? Okay. People will sometimes say, is it time for hospice? And that's sometimes paired with, I just want to be comfortable. I'm going to suggest that the question for many people should be, is it time for hospice because that's going to get me what I want? That's a little different than, have we done everything possible out there that the doctors say is available, whether it's a good idea or not sometimes. Oh, I guess we've done everything, so it must be time for hospice. As opposed to, hospice is a path to get what I want. So how does that work? Well, there is a question about qualifying. So let me just sort of put that out there. Most of us will live to Medicare age before we need hospice. There are children who get hospice, there are teenagers, yes, but I'm going to say the vast majority of people in the United States who get hospice when they have Medicare, which is why Medicare actually has a benefit for hospice to pay for hospice. So let's start with Medicare for a second. Medicare defines hospice as a comprehensive, holistic program of care. They say terminally ill, come back to that, to focus on comfort care instead of curative care. This is a direct quote from Medicare. I just paraphrased a minute. Do we cure heart disease? Not usually. Do we cure dementia? No. So some of the language, I'm saying that because some of the language is a little outdated. When Medicare says terminally ill, end-stage medical condition is what the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania says. But when Medicare says terminally ill, they mean more likely than not have a life expectancy of 6 months. Is that a guarantee? Understand, as a hospice medical director, I actually have to sign on the dotted line electronically, but I sign on the dotted line that somebody has a life expectancy of 6 months or less. What happens if I'm wrong and they live longer than 6 months? Okay, that's fine. Medicare understands that I'm not writing a guarantee. I'm writing a medical assessment of what is likely. So that's how we end up with people in hospice longer than 6 months. That's perfectly fine. But is it reasonable to think that somebody's life expectancy could be 6 months or less? That's what terminally ill in this circumstance means. And curative care, as I've said, we don't cure heart disease. We're not curing end-stage lung disease. We're not curing dementia. So the language is a little outdated. What Medicare has meant by that is focusing on comfort and other goals as opposed to prolonging life for as long as you possibly can. Okay? So, for those of you who have not had recent experience with hospice, there's a whole list of services: nursing, aides, medical, social support. So some people get afraid of that. So social worker, people who've had other instances where social workers have been involved in their life, sometimes are a little scared by a social worker. The idea of a social worker is to come in and provide both emotional support as well as resources, and both for the patient and the family. Okay, it's not a legal role for a social worker. Spiritual counseling. We're here in a church, so it's easy to think spirituality and religion. Understand that spirituality is not religion only. So even people who do not have a religious affiliation, even people who don't have any religious beliefs, or folks who are actively atheists, have a spiritual life, which is what gives meaning and purpose to your life. So spiritual care is available to everybody. It's not a religious construct. Your physician or your attending nurse practitioner or PA, if you don't have one, then hospice can provide that. Usually for our hospice, it's me. Grief and loss counseling, sometimes that's for the patient. Sometimes we have patients who are still struggling with grief and loss that they have suffered. We had a patient recently who is still struggling with the fact that her husband died recently. And we provided grief support to her for that, as well as supporting her family, because she also seemed to be at end of life, and was. Medical equipment and supplies, drugs for symptom management, but also to take care of the conditions that people have. Heart disease, we're not stopping all your heart meds. Lung disease, no one's stopping all the lung medications. But there are other things in hospice that can be available. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, dietary counseling, short-term inpatient care. So why do I bring this up? Because decisions get made in hospice, which is what I was originally asked to sort of come talk to you about, they go back to our advanced directives. It's not about what are all the treatments that are out there that are possible. It's what are your goals? What's important to you? What is likely to get you what you want? I've ordered a couple of x-rays in hospice this week because they were going to change the care plan. What we don't typically do is just order tests to see what they come up with. That's a decision difference in hospice. You think about somebody who's fragile and frail, where going to a hospital is a hard thing for them to do. Going to the doctor's office is a day-long event and takes a lot of work and coordination. If their goal is to not do that, then how do we take care of what's important to them? Not, can I order a test? So the idea in hospice is to figure out if your goals are going to be furthered by a test or a treatment, then we talk about how we get that for you. It's not just because it exists out there. Here's an example to sort of help you. I had a patient family ask me 2 weeks ago, can we have physical therapy for mom? Well, what are we hoping for? We'd like to be able to get her out of bed, and she needs to be evaluated by the physical therapist so that the people in the facility can do it safely. Yeah, that sounds like a great idea. Let's do that. Last week, I had a request for physical therapy for a hospice patient. The physical therapist said, this person is not a candidate for physical therapy. This person is so fragile and frail. This is a bad idea. And the family said, yeah, but can we have it anyway? What are mom's goals? Mom wants to be comfortable. Mom doesn't want to get out of bed. Mom hurts when she gets out of bed because mom is very fragile. And physical therapy says this is a bad idea. So you know what? Even though it's on the list, no. Physical therapy does not help mom's goals. Physical therapy does not help mom. We're not going to approve physical therapy. How we make these decisions is based on the kinds of things we put in our advanced directives. So here's a thought for you. If the goal for somebody you love or for yourself is to die in the hospital on as many machines as possible, or as long as you can draw breath, you can put that in your advanced directive. But if the goal is to say, I don't want to go back to the hospital, or mom doesn't want to go back to the hospital, or dad doesn't want to go back to the emergency room, dad doesn't want to die in the emergency room, mom doesn't want to die in the hospital, we don't want to die on machines, how do you almost guarantee to not die in the hospital on machines? You don't go to the hospital. Now that sounds simple, doesn't it? But what's our reflexive action when somebody's in trouble medically? What have we been taught to do? 911, and what is their job? To get you to the hospital. So if that's not what you want, then you need an alternative plan. Hope is not a plan. I hope mom doesn't have to go back to the hospital is not a plan. Calling hospice for somebody who wants that kind of care and has a life expectancy reasonably 6 months or less, not guaranteed, hospice becomes a means to get what you want, not a default because there's nothing left. Because this is how we make decisions. So what about Mr. R? Let me bring it back to Mr. R. He said he lives at home, increasing debility from multiple diagnoses, recurrent pneumonia. The last time he was in the hospital, he was referred to hospice. So now he's been bedbound, decreased appetite, sleeps 18 hours a day. Sounds like the same Mr. R we had in the beginning, right? It's because it is the same Mr. R we had in the beginning. But now he's got restlessness and agitation and fever and congested cough, and he's got recurrent pneumonia. But he's got hospice. So what are we going to do? He's going to get medication for his fever, for his cough, for his shortness of breath. And probably if he's coughing that badly, he's got pain, because it hurts to have pneumonia. If you had pneumonia where you're coughing really hard, it hurts. And if we want to try antibiotics, let's try the ones we can do at home. And let's increase the nursing support, and let's have oxygen in there. And let's say, if he gets better, then he will get better. And if he doesn't, then the plan to not go to the hospital and die on machines is fulfilled. I can't tell you what's going to happen to Mr. R. I've had Mr. R's get better, and I've had Mr. R's not get better. But what we try to do is have Mr. R get the care he wants. And if it's to not go to the hospital, and to be comfortable, and to be with his family, we will do everything in our power to make that happen. Because it's not just making decisions, and it's not just filling out the documents. It's planning the care so that you get what you want for yourself or for somebody you love. So, we've got a couple of minutes. If you've got questions, I'm happy to take them. Sorry, folks, online. Hard to do that, but go ahead.
Yeah, also, when you're talking about powers of healthcare powers of attorney, I think it's important to have 3 layers, because another thing that can happen is that first person, maybe there's a change between their liking or disliking each other, or maybe when the rubber meets the road, that first one doesn't want to do it because they can't come to make decisions like that.
I agree.
And you can refuse to be the power of attorney if you have a notary notarize some sort of note or something like that.
People can decline to make decisions. That's exactly right. They can say, this is too much. I have too much going on in my life. I can't do this right now. So I agree. There are, just because you pick someone does not mean they have to do something. So I think having at least 2, not together, but in succession, 3 is very good. 3 is very good. Yes, sir.
If within the 6-month period that you've certified that the person would be end stage, they are discontinued because they've improved,
Right.
but they still have, say, for instance, pain, what options are available to them?
So if somebody has enrolled in hospice care because things looked grim and their prognosis did appear to be 6 months or less, that was a reasonable expectation, and then some things improved, which does happen. And Medicare doesn't say once you've been certified for hospice, you can stay in hospice forever and ever, amen. There are periods of time that Mike's alluding to that we have to re-up that. Say, yep, it still has a prognosis of 6 months or less. Sometimes in hospice with really good symptom management and not doing things that actually made them feel worse, people do improve. And their life expectancy looks longer than it used to. So if somebody is still having issues, there are a couple of things that can be done. First of all, if we've got somebody on a good plan, and you mentioned pain specifically, and it manages their pain, their attending physician, nurse practitioner, PA, whoever it is, can continue those meds. Those medications are not dependent on someone being in hospice. I don't use medicines in hospice that I can't use somewhere else. So first of all, the plan can be continued as it is. Secondly, there are palliative care practices that are not about hospice, but they still focus on pain and symptom management. So there are options there depending on where you live and unfortunately what your insurance is sometimes, that there are palliative programs that we can recommend. And then sometimes somebody may not qualify for hospice anymore. Medicare has some rules and maybe we're outside of that rule, we can't say yes, but we can sort of follow along and say, we'll keep an eye with you on mom, dad, your husband, your wife, whomever it is. And we call that our bridge program, so that you've got an easy bridge back to hospice if things go awry. So there are a couple of different options depending on what's going on. Continue the meds as they are. If it looks like prognosis or life expectancy has improved a lot, we can look at a palliative program. Or if it looks like this is kind of an in-between period, we're not sure how things are gonna go when hospice is no longer involved, we can do a bridge program. So there are a couple of different options for that. Yes, sir.
Isn't palliative care more of the start before you go to the next step, hospice care?
In some cases, yes. So palliative care is not focused on those typically last 6-month issues. They're focused on pain and symptom management at any point. People can have palliative care from something that they're going to be cured of. So for example, something that is underutilized, but we see more and more is palliative care in oncology. So when someone's getting treatment for cancer, from which they might recover, but they're having significant symptoms